Okay. Okay, so let's just start with something a bit obvious, but I never seen some real study on that. So what is happening when you are losing a packet? So what is the impact? Do you lose 1% of packet? If you lose 1% of packet, do you lose 1% of alert? If you lose 2%, is it linear? Is it complex? It's hard to know. So I did just do something quite simple, which was to take a decent pcap file, 445 megaoctet, and then I did use TCP at first SCAPI, try to load the 400 megaoctet file in a SCAPI, so my box just crashed, so I say, okay, that's not a good technique, let's try to find another technique. So I did use something from TCP edit, from the TCP replay suite, and I did simulate packet loss. So for each percentage of packet loss, I did do a few runs, and then I did run Suricata on this modified pcap, and then I did compare the result. So it was a bit worse from what I was expecting. So if you only lose 3% of packet loss, if you only have 3% of packet loss, you have something like 10% of alert down. And if you have 25% of packet loss, you have half of the alert that were out, that you don't see anymore. And this is not talking about the file extraction, where you need to be super cautious. Here you lose 0.4% of packet, and you lose 10% of file info. Everything is truncated. And you reach 50, on this pcap at least, you reach 50% of file extraction with only 5% of drop. So okay, drop, it's super easy to say, okay, I'm going to put a bigger system, it will scale easily, it's super easy. But there is a few issues, like the elephant flow, where you have a really big traffic, like in blue, that can fill completely one Suricata thread. The analysis is really simple. One Suricata is doing a CPU intensive task, so it can handle between 250, 500 megabytes per second, maybe a bit more if you are lucky, depending on the rule set. So if ever your flow is bigger than that, it will not fit. So you will start drop packet for this flow, but also for all the flow on the same thread. So yeah, so what's happening is that the big flow will take everything, and you will drop the remaining packet from different flow. So one thing that you can say, oh, that's easy, I'm going to add some memory, I'm going to have some bigger ring buffer, but if your elephant flow is a backup, like take half of the night, increasing the ring buffer will have no impact because you will fill it after some time. Yeah, so as I'm French, I like to work less and get more. So Suricata is doing a bit the same because we've got this, we stopped to analyze a part of the traffic as soon as we reach what is called the stream def. So that's an internal value, stream reassembly def in the YAML configuration. And we are not doing the streaming anymore when we reach this limit. So it's also possible to set it to infinite if you want. And if you do not that, after the stream def, only individual packet will continue to be inspected. By that, I mean, as we have seen before, if you got an alert packet or alert IP, maybe you will have some match in this case. And if you look at attack characteristics, in almost all the case, the attack is at the start of the session, so this is okay to do something like that. So what comes naturally after that is to say, okay, there is some condition where I don't want to work anymore on one flow. So let's try to do the less possible work on the packet from this kind of flow. So the idea is to tag a flow as bypassed when you maintain a table of bypass flow, and as soon as you see one packet belonging to one of these flow, you just discard it. So this was introduced in Suricata. We've got two bypass methods available. One is the local bypass. So Suricata will get the packet, do the decoding of the packet to get the IP header, and then check if there is a flow corresponding to this packet, and discard. If ever the flow is bypassed, then it will just stop doing the work on packet. The second implementation is a bit different. So when we see that we want to bypass a flow, we will call a callback function that is implemented by the capture method, and then we will the capture method is in charge of discarding the packet for this bypass flow. So if you are doing local bypass, we are doing the bypass at this step. So it means that all the steps before have been handled. So it's a bit better from the stream def reassembly thing, but it's not super good. With capture bypass, we are doing bypass really early. So we managed to get some better performances by avoiding any saturation inside Suricata. In terms of code, there is now, it has been introduced in 3.2, there is now bypass capability via a callback, so there is an API, even some Doxygen documentation, I think, about that, where that describe how you can use this API to trigger bypass. So it's really a simple API, so if ever your network card capture method is supporting something that could look like bypass or flow bypass, you can implement the callback function. Initial implementation was done in a net filter queue, so this was really simple because we were just putting a mark. We are just putting a mark on the packet, and then we've got some specific IP table and F table rules that will discard all the marked packet. So this way we switch from a routing with packets sent to user space and sent back to kernel, so quite slow, to a routing where we just have the pure Linux routing because we skip completely Suricata for the bypass flow. There is a different strategy. One is to activate the stream def bypass. So once we reach stream reassembly def, we trigger the bypass. So instead of just stopping the streaming, we stop all inspection. So this is set by setting the stream bypass to yes in the YAML file. And there is also another technique, which is the case that when the flow is encrypted, we don't see any more of the flow. We don't see anything in the flow. Attack detection method is proving the contrary, and if it was explained yesterday. But if you don't want to use this signature, then in that case you can set TLS bypass to, you can activate TLS bypass by setting encrypt on link to bypass. So if you're friendly with attack detection, you've got some other technique, which is to selectively bypass some traffic. So for instance, you can say, if the traffic is going to Suricata IO, then you bypass the traffic. Or if you want to do that on TLS, you can say, if the traffic is to this Netflix TLS SNI, then in this case, I will bypass all the traffic for this, for as soon as there is an alert firing. Yeah, so, okay, that was done for NFQ. Working correctly, we had almost everything good, and then I was like, yes, that's cool, but Suricata is supposed to be IDS on IPS. We fixed first the IPS issue, but now let's try to fix the IDS issue. At the time, it was almost impossible to have a solution when I start to look at it, because the packet was just about getting the packet. There was no method available to do something like a flow table that could be necessary to handle this kind of case. Then we had extended Barclay packet filter that did appear, and that was pushed in some different hook that we can use in Hive packet. And so extended Barclay packet filter, sorry, hard to say, is a method, is a an extended virtual machine compared to what we have in Berkeley packet filter. And the main difference is that you can have shared structure between kernel and user space. So basically, you can define a hash table, an array, some kind of structure like that, and you can add element to this array from the user space, and you can, in the kernel, in your BPF filter, like the one you had with TCP-dump, it's the same logic. Instead of checking the syntax statically, it will check the availability in the hash of the value. I will show you an example after that. And so, as it's a bit more complicated, the eBPF developer, instead of letting you just edit some arbitrary code because there is a kind of an assembly language for that, they came with a C backend, so you can write a subset of C, and with CLang and LLVM, you can generate your eBPF file. And there is also a library that is currently in packaging phase, which is called libpf, that is available in the Linux kernel that allow you to load eBPF file. So that's what is used in Suricata. Just as a note, if you want to play with BPF, extended BPF, I mean, there is a lot of interesting things to do in terms of performance, monitoring, things like that on system. You can use the BCC for BPF compiler collection, that contains all the glue between eBPF file and the system. So you can, it's a bit funny. So you can write Python code that dynamically compile C code that is the BPF filter, and then inject that into the kernel. So it seems a bit strange, but it works, and it allows you to do any trick you want almost on one system. Yeah, so what do we need to be able to bypass INAF packet? So we need to have Suricata to be able to tell the kernel to ignore flows. And in the kernel, we need to be able to have a list of flow entries, and we need to be able to discard the packet belonging to this flow. And as Suricata is responsible of the decision of bypassing a flow, we need to be able to update from user space this flow table. So this is exactly what you can do with eBPF maps, because you got shared structure between kernel and user space. So that was for me the beginning of a big journey, because I started this work something like 2 or 3 years ago, and it just did reach Suricata in 4.1. But as you will see, there is a lot of features that have been added. One of the impact, so in fact, eBPF, once I did add the structure, the necessary structure in Suricata to be able to use eBPF file, to load an eBPF file, I was able easily to use them in different points. One of the points where you can use eBPF is in the filter. So instead of having a BPF filter, you can now in Suricata 4.1 declare and set up an eBPF filter to use instead of using TCP-dump-like syntax. So what you can do with it? So that's quite interesting, because as you have structure like array, you can fix some problems. So instead, for instance, if you want to set a list of hosts that you want to sniff, the traditional method that you will have, that you have with BPF, is to say not this IP or this IP or this IP or this IP or this IP, and then you end up at no more BPF file too big, or syntax error, and then you cannot inject that into Suricata. So as with eBPF, you have maps. You don't have this limitation in terms of number of checks done by the BPF file, because the lookup just counts for one operation. So available in the source code of Suricata 4.1, we have filter.c that is a super advanced filtering system. It drops IPv6. IPv6. And you've got another one that is a bit more interesting, that is VLAN filter, that accept a packet for a set of VLAN. So I don't know if you know this old issue, that it's not possible to have a BPF, a traditional BPF filter that allow you to filter on one VLAN on to only get the packet for two different VLAN. So that's something that we can do with eBPF. So one interest is that you can have something that is called Pine maps, where you expose maps. So a maps is a shared structure between kernel and user space to the file system, and you can update these maps from the user space and change dynamically your BPF filter. So, okay, let's try a demo. Okay, donc, not the good shell. Yes, this is the good shell. Okay, so I've got a Suricata. I will start it, no rules, run mode single for now. So what you can see is that you have messages, yes, cool. Where is my line? Yes, okay. I forgot 1V, but I did activation of the eBPF filter on the socket. So I got eBPF active. So next step is this command. So basically I will check SSH event or in the if.json.log. Okay, there is nothing. Super cool. So, I know I should have it. Should have one ready. Nope. Yes, okay. So let's connect to this box. And yes, okay, so Suricata is working. We got a SSH event. So now the question is, what will I do next? So what we have here is that the filter that is in place is handling a list of IP, and if ever the IP is in the list, it drops the packet. So it's managing a blacklist. So what I can do is that I can go here. So I did a connection to this IP, and then I ask the system from user space. I will update the BPF filter and say, if ever the packet comes with 37.187 IP, I will drop the packet. So I did an update of the set, and now if I redo the test, I should see nothing. So let's wait a bit. Yes, nothing. Okay. So if you don't trust me, let's go to another box. And this time we should see yes, we should see the SSH event. So dynamically you can update the map, and then you're able to blacklist, whitelist. So you can do different thing. Again, I'm gonna show you the code. Okay. Yep. Okay. So the code is quite simple. You define a maps where you've got one key size, value size, and then you parse the header to get the IP address. Then you say, is the IP address in the set? If the IP address is in the set, you get the counter, and then you return 0 to drop the packet. If you don't want to drop the packet, you return 1. So here we have two hash lookup, one operation to add the counter, so you can even have a counter of drop that is stored in the BPF, so you can fetch the data and get the number of the content. So let's try to do that. BPF tool. Yes. Well, not really cool on the display. I need to improve that, but you can really fetch the information from that. You can have statistics on this element. You can remove element from the command line, so you can really manage everything. Yeah, so just to give you an idea that it's a super simple one because it's just IPv4 blacklist, but you can do almost anything because the key are almost arbitrary length, so you can say I want to do that per service, so you concatenate IP on port, and then you have a white list of service that you want to monitor. Okay, so you invent your filter, you can do a lot of things. So yes, I got my demo working. I'm quite happy, because 2 hours before it was not working. So yes, what else can you do? You can also do quite the same thing with a similar code for load balancing. So in this case, you activate cluster eBPF, and then you load an eBPF file. So it allows you to do what you want in terms of load balancing. You define what you can parse the packet and then define your own policy. What is currently implemented is to follow Chris Wakelin ID on getting XBICs working correctly. So we got IP pair load balancing that is implemented via the lb.c file. So yeah, I was talking about bypass, and then I talk to you about something else. Let's get back to bypass. So bypass is just a simple, not simple, but it's just a normal filter with some constraint on some structure. So we have a flow table for IPv4 and a flow table for IPv6. And we check the same way you have seen the query in the previous C file. We check that if the flow is in the table. So that allows us to do the bypass. And we've got flow handling inside Suricata to see that there is no more activity on one flow, and that after timeout, we trigger the cleaning. So this is done at the socket level. And then there was a new thing that did come something like 2 years ago, maybe I think that's 2 years ago, XDP for extreme data path, which is an attempt by the Linux kernel developer to offer high performance for things where what was done inside the Linux kernel was too expensive. So the idea is to run user space code close to the kernel, not close to the kernel, but close to the hardware, the closest possible, so we can do tasks like DDoS fighting, custom protocol implementation, so we can do a lot of things. One of the bad motivations of the project was to kill DPDK by providing a solution that is universal with a standard API. But the main motivation was really performance and to be able to handle 100 gig and to do, like presented yesterday by the guy from David from Netronome, to be able to say, okay, I will have some treatment on one in the NIC at 50 million packets per second. So the XDP is quite simple. It's just running eBPF code as early as possible. So there is 3 layers where you can run XDP. There is the driver layer, which is the most common one. So the drivers are modified. They get the packet from the ring buffer of the card, and they apply the eBPF code to the ring buffer. There is in the card, so in this case, the same eBPF code is running inside the FPGA of the card. So that's the most efficient one, if your card has some good capabilities. And there is I'm working on my laptop and I don't have an expensive card method, which is the socket method, where you run this as an emulation, just like regular. You don't have any gain in performance, but you can test the code. So what you can do, you can drop packet. So almost every test that you will see by XDP people is how fast they are managing to drop packet. So it's extreme drop performance. You can transmit to the kernel. So in this case, you say, in fact, XDP pass, and then it goes the normal way through the kernel. And you can do some rewrite, transmit packet to the kernel, you can redirect to another interface, or you can CPU load balance. You will see these different things after. Implementation-wide, it was quite the same, but a bit worse, because I had to patch libBPF to get it working inside the Linux kernel, so it was painful. So yes, but it works. We got XDP bypass. So we have no number to show you, but there is some work, ongoing work to get some number. But yeah, so I did fix IF packet, IP bypass. Now the next question was, oh yes, but if we have bypass in IPS mode for IF packet, that would be super cool. But if we do an XDP drop, so if we drop the packet, then the packet will never reach the other side, so that's bad. But in fact, what is super cool is that we can do XDP redirect instead of, so we return XDP redirect instead of returning XDP drop. And then in this case, the packet that is just really early in the driver, for instance, not the kernel, but we have a direct copy from this datagram to the transmit queue of another interface. So we managed to transmit the packet from one interface to another interface without going inside the kernel. So we cannot be faster. From that, we really have a direct transmission from hardware to hardware. Another issue that I already talked about in a previous Suricon was the problem of non-symmetric hashing, where the RSS function is non-symmetric. So what is usually done is to set RSS to 1 to avoid asymmetric hashing and then out-of-order packet inside Suricata. But the problem is that the consequence of that is that one CPU is completely burned and outrun by the creation of a kernel structure, because the dispatch of the packet is done afterwards. So we have no balancing of the kernel task, and it's just when we reach user space that we have balancing inside Suricata. So that's quite bad. So if ever your CPU is not powerful enough, or if ever you have too much packet per second, you will start to drop packet because the kernel is not able to deal with the amount of packet. So to do that, the XDP filter introduced in Suricata 4.1 has a special feature which is called CPU redirect that you can set up from the YAML that will allow that will modify the XDP eBPF code used by XDP to do CPU load balancing inside the eBPF code. So we just get the datagram from the card, then we determine which CPU will handle the kernel task, and then we can get down into Suricata via fpacket. So this way we don't have anymore only the kernel task done on one CPU, but the main tasks done by the kernel are done on a set of CPUs specified in the configuration. One other possible usage of XDP is to be able to strip tunnel. The idea behind that is that, let's say that you are a telco operator, you have in the LTE world, you've got some big tunnel that contain the traffic of multiple clients. So you've got multiple flow from multiple IP, so it's usually really, really big flow. So XDP is proposing a solution for that, because what's happening currently in Suricata is that you got an elephant flow that you cannot deal with, so because one Suricata thread will handle all the flow that are inside this tunnel. So it will collapse under the work. So what we can do is that we can, in fact, detect that we have a tunnel in the eBPF code, move the start of the data to the internal IP, I mean to the start of the IP header inside of the tunnel, and then we send this modified data to the lower stack. So this way, instead of seeing one big tunnel flow, we see the inside flows, and then we can have a better load balancing inside Suricata. So currently there is no implementation of that that has been done, but it's just a few lines of code. So if ever you're interested, have some setup to test, I would be really happy to provide you the code to be able to test it. Yeah, it's just the beginning. There is some work that is currently done with Netrodome because, as you can guess, putting the eBPF code in the FPGA of a card is not completely transparent. There is a few limitations in card. So I did made an update of the code that is currently not available in 4.1, but that fix the problem of getting the eBPF code inside the Netrodome card. And we should have some tests starting soon, maybe with Michel, we will see. But he already has Netrodome card, so we will see we can do that at Mozilla Foundation. The next thing is the AFXDP. It's a new capture method. So if we get back a little bit to what I was saying, I did explain you a lot of technique to avoid the load induced by the kernel work. But if you look at what Suricata is doing, Suricata is taking the raw data and work on the raw data. So all the work done in kernel to prepare for the routing, to prepare for a lot of things, we don't need it at all. So the idea of AFXDP is to say, okay, let's just provide a way for the user space to get the datagram as they come. So no handling by the kernel at all. And this comes with a new architecture that should provide some interesting features. It's a bit better for the rig buffer. So we will see how it goes. I will start to work on that really fast. It's now part of 4.18, so you can use it on a regular kernel. Okay, so Suricata, eBPF and XDP, it's available in 4.1. There is a lot of things coming. There is a bit about XDP in the Septune 2 doc. There is a dedicated page in Suricata doc about eBPF XDP. And yes, I want to thank the guy from the network development, Jesper, Alexei, and Daniel. They are really helpful. And if you need to contact me, you can mail me or suffer my badger on Twitter. That's it. If you have questions.